Hey guys, today we're looking back at some of your favourite petty revenge stories from last year. What's the grossest prank you've ever heard someone pull? Well, whatever it is, I doubt it even comes close to what OP does to her husband. I cleaned the toilet with my husband's toothbrush. Posted by SRed81. I'm not sure if this is petty revenge, but it was petty and it feels like revenge. Edit. This happened years ago, and if the same scenario ever happened again, I wouldn't allow it to continue the way it did. I was frustrated and upset, and at the time, I felt like his own actions caused this. So, my husband can be, and often is, a dick. He often makes assumptions about my actions, usually negative assumptions. So, the bathroom was pretty gross, and I decided I was going to give it a spring clean. And I mean, toothbrush cleaning the cracks and crevices. Usually, I have a few old cleaning toothbrushes, but they were missing. No biggie, I thought. I'll just use my husband's old flattened gross looking toothbrush. I'd already bought him a brand new one a few days prior, so I thought it was time to downgrade his old toothbrush. So that's what I did. I used that toothbrush in all sorts of gross spaces. I just happened to be rinsing his toothbrush out after having cleaned the toilet when he came into the room. He got really angry and asked me why I had his toothbrush in my hand. I was like, well, I bought you a new. He interrupted me and yelled, "Put it back!" I tried to continue explaining, but he said, "That's my toothbrush." Me, well, yes I know, but him, "Put it back!" Me, I mean, I would put it back, but him, "That's my toothbrush, don't touch my toothbrush." Me, well yeah, but him, "Put it back." At this point, I was flustered and upset and angry. Like, why couldn't he just let me explain that I'd already bought him a new toothbrush? I'd already used this one on the floor, the bathtub, the sink, and the toilet. But every time I tried to tell him this, he would interrupt. Frankly, I told him on multiple occasions to please just at least let me tell him what I'm doing, and to please stop interrupting me, and never letting me get a word in. I could have yelled and interrupted him, like he kept doing to me. But instead, I gave him what he wanted. I was like, okay, fine. And I put his toothbrush back and walked out. F him. He got what he asked for. Plus, I don't understand why he acted that way. If the roles were reversed and I walked in on him rinsing my toothbrush, I would have asked, "What are you doing with my toothbrush?" And then I would have listened to his answer. And when he said, "Oh, I got you a new toothbrush and I've used this old one to clean," I would have said, "Oh, okay, thanks for getting me a new toothbrush." And that would have been the end of it. But no, he just can't seem to treat me kindly. So yeah, I could have persisted and told him, but his seemingly irrational anger made me feel like, F you, enjoy your toilet toothbrush. Down in the comments, OP gives some extra context. I've asked my husband to go with me to therapy many times. He's always adamant about not going because I refuse to be told that I'm the problem. At least he's self-aware. If your husband's a dick, like you said, why are you wasting your life with him? You only get one life. Parent says it's not our business what her son does on a community garden, so we let him get up to his neck in poo. Literally. Posted by Grummelox. This happened a couple of hours ago. The story is so fresh, you can still smell it. On our community garden, we get teams of kids from the local school come to help, and they often turn up on a Saturday morning as well. They're almost entirely well behaved, which is good, as there's not a lot we can do about bad behaviour beyond a stern voice. There's this one lad who came for the first time last week. We don't know him, but we made him very welcome. He only lasted half an hour before storming off in tears after his third telling off for spinning round and round holding a tool and then letting it fly off at head height. This morning his mum came with him. I saw him point out my friend and I, but he didn't ask to join in, so after shouting hello, we let them be. After about 10 minutes, he started wandering off, and my friend shouted, "Don't go behind the greenhouse, mate, it's not safe around there." Well, his mum had obviously been waiting for this because she went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds flat, demanding to know, do we own this garden? And if not, what business is it of ours where her son goes? We explained that we just want him to be safe, and she replied that she's quite capable of taking care of that herself. Thank you. Fine, on you go then. Off he went, exploring behind the greenhouse, which is not safe because it's a compost heap, which is very unstable, and the muck mound, which is a giant pile of horse manure we get delivered every autumn. By spring, the inside is all nice and rotten down, and the outside is hard and crusty, and less strong than you think. After a minute, there was a crunch, and then a squeal. I think we did well to drag him out without saying, "I told you so," or laughing. He was absolutely black from chest height downwards, and although well-rotted manure doesn't really smell bad, it's very thick and sticky and slimy. His mum grabbed him without a word and they headed for the gate. He started bawling the second the surprise wore off. My friend said, "Would you like some bin bags to spread out in your car?" And to her credit, she did say thanks when he handed them to her. I wonder if we'll see them again next week. Down in the comments, Passing Judgment 68 says, "Augustus Gloop learned a good lesson today." Or should I say, Augustus Poop. Am I the a-hole for asking my sister, "What did you expect?" after her husband left her for a younger woman? Posted by a throwaway account. My 48 female sister Caroline, 45 female, has spent her last 20 years bragging because she's 10 years younger than her husband Ethan, 55 male. That by the time she hits 40 plus, Ethan's sex drive will have plummeted too low to pursue others, and the 20-somethings wouldn't want to date men past 35. Ethan was 34 and my sister was a week from turning 24 when they first got together officially. At the time, 34-year-old Ethan was a newly minted senior VP with a 35-year-old wife, Emma, and a 4-year-old daughter. Ethan told her that Emma had become a sanctimonious mummy type after she gave birth, stopped waking up at 5 AM to exercise, withheld sex, and became a negative nagging shrew. Ethan physically left Emma for Caroline, but it was Emma who filed for divorce. Caroline was angry because she claims Emma was the one who filed for divorce, yet she's the one who became bitter and hostile after the divorce happened. For a while I sympathised with Caroline because everyone criticised her relationship. However, it felt like Caroline and Ethan made the fact that Ethan was punching above his weight in terms of having a younger woman their entire personality as a couple and individuals. I think it's because Ethan was poor into his early 20s and said he thought the best he could ever do was the sort of attractive, after a few beers, truck stop waitress. Back then, it was much easier for someone with no connections to rise, and Ethan did. Then, after his divorce and before marrying Caroline, Ethan started his own firm and began making even more money. Caroline signed a prenup but maintained that it would never be used. Caroline used to laugh when Emma told her there's always a younger woman out there. Caroline replied that she'd asked Ethan and he'd said that a 10-year age gap was gigantic to him, and that Caroline was the combination of someone who he'd always see as much younger while also being able to relate to her. Caroline would also say, in a place where a stepdaughter could hear her saying it, that Emma aged so much faster than Ethan, and that she's likely regularly mistaken for her daughter's grandmother. Wow, and you sympathise with this woman? Why? Well, all this about he'll always see me as much younger disappeared a few years ago. Caroline started becoming very withdrawn and miserable. She'd act out in ways, but Ethan wouldn't even bat an eye at her antics. Then, suddenly, just before the holidays, Ethan picked a fight by telling her that her hand mannerisms are annoying and left the house. She found out that he was living with a 24-year-old assistant that he hired with no experience. Now, despite texts saying that 3 kids miss him and she doesn't deserve this when she's never denied him sex, he's filed for divorce. Caroline came to me crying and would go on rants about how Ethan will realise a 24-year-old sees him as a grandpa, and I rolled my eyes and said, "What'd you expect?" And that I had no sympathy when for years I've had to listen to her saying age gap detractors are bitter losers and that Ethan will always see her as a prize. I also told her that 10 years is basically the starting point when it comes to trophy wife relationships. She got angry and screamed, "Are you calling me old when Ethan's pushing 60? And left. Am I the a-hole? Down in the comments, Insidious Colossus says, when a man marries his mistress, he creates a vacancy. Call the HOA because my yard is devaluing your house? Alright, I'll have it cleaned by the inspection date. Posted by Jumboface. This is a story of my mother's. She's always been incredibly hard-headed, but this sticks out a lot from my teenage years. Once a year, she always had us pull everything out of the garage. Lots of boxes. My mum has a concerning amount of possessions. So we could go through it and clean/reorganize. This particular year, the couple who owned the house from across from us were in the process of selling their house. Unhappy with my mother's unsightly driveway, covered in boxes soiling their good image, they called the HOA. By the time my mother received the letter, the mess had already been put away, but they decided to get her on a few other complaints, such as the bike against the side of the house and the patchy gravel. She had 2 weeks to get everything up to standard. Petty and easily frustrated, my mother knew immediately who called, since the couple had come over and told her flat out that with their renovations, they would be selling their house for way more than any other house in this neighborhood, and would appreciate if she respected that by keeping her property on par. For the next 2 weeks, every box in that garage was in our driveway. The couch and the living room TV came out next. This was early summer, so it was perfect weather to sit in your yard in your short shorts and sports bra. My mum made sure to wave and smile every time they brought someone over for a showing. The final step came at the end of the 2 weeks though. After the yard had been cleaned up and cleared by the HOA, my mother went to the local Walmart and bought a "for sale" sign. She wrote a quarter of their ridiculous asking price on it and finished off with a big "sold" written across the front and stuck it in our front yard. No clue what they ended up selling their house for, but it sat empty for a while, so I assume it was below the asking price. Too long didn't read. Don't tell my mum she's devaluing your house, or she'll go far out of her way to do so, all while complying with the HOA. You want me to give you the key on Saturday? Sure, I will. So this happened when I was a teenager, around 18 or 19, and I worked for a small bakery in my town. It's worth mentioning that I'm a woman. The owner was the worst kind of man I've ever met. He had no business being around people, let alone managing employees. I was a key holder and the sole cashier of the store from really early on. I was left alone to run the place and close it every day. He only gave us half-hour breaks for 10-hour shifts. He was racist and homophobic, and frequently made fun of his employees, so his buddies could laugh at us when they visited. I can go on and on about this man, but the best summary I can give is I saw 2 people quit in their first day while working for him. I told him I was leaving 3 weeks in, and gave him a week's notice. He, of course, complained about how unprofessional I, the teenager, was being. I also specifically told him I would not work the next Saturday. My last day would be Friday. Now, I didn't want to work Saturday, because Saturday was sandwich day, the day the entire building stops making cookies and pies and makes sandwiches so they can be shipped off for other businesses to sell. It was always the most stressful day because there was too much work and too few people to do it. Also, because the owner, instead of lounging from the store, had to work with me, and he had no respect for personal space. How close he insisted on getting bordered on sexual harassment. No matter how many times I brought up how uncomfortable I was, he ignored or interrupted me. So I didn't want to work Saturday. Well, in my last week, I reminded him of this several times, but he never seemed to get it. On my last day, I asked him when I should give my key back. He interrupted me before I could offer Friday and said at the end of my shift on Saturday. I chose not to correct him, so I didn't. I locked up as usual on Friday, slept in the next morning, and wandered down to the bakery to give my key back. I walked in and it was chaos. Customers were lined up, and an employee who usually works in the back was trying to man the cash register and failing. And the owner had gotten off his ass for once and was rushing around making hundreds of sandwiches, red in the face and swearing under his breath. I waved at him, but he made a point to look away from me. So I put my key on the counter and walked out. He actually had to sell the bakery a few months later, something about running out of people willing to work. I know it wasn't the catalyst for that particular development, but it was nice to know I helped. Boss forced me to give away my hard-earned money, so I sabotaged her bonus. Posted by Between My Ears. Every year, the company I work for has a huge fundraising campaign. They solicit from all employees to voluntarily contribute towards charities directly from their paycheck, pre-tax. You're encouraged and very heavily pressured to donate to pre-selected charities of their choice, in small amounts per month for the year, or one big lump sum. If you did cave and do this, it'd be better to do monthly payments, because if they fire you or you quit, at least it's not the full year of payments they're taking from you. Think lots of email reminders and signage all over the company walls, ploys of having your name entered into prize drawings. It didn't matter how much you contributed, prizes were always won by company executives and leadership. The company had running totals for each department on how many people were contributing. They wanted 100% participation from all departments. It was supposed to be private and anonymous and only show numbers. I quickly learned it wasn't as anonymous or voluntary as advertised. If one or two people were holding back, they were usually approached by the administrator and pressured to participate. What's really strange is the administrator of my department at the time, who was usually very stoic and stern, became giddy about the charity campaign. It was weird and raised alarms. One year, I was struggling hard, so I wasn't going to contribute. I was so broke. Here comes the admin lady into the office. "We are almost at 100% participation," claps giddy squee. She looks around and starts to question each person. She was eyeballing me the whole time, trying to subtly make her way to me. She gets to my desk. "Have you made your contribution yet?" Without thinking, I should have just told her it was personal. I told her I was still considering which charity. She pulls a chair over to my desk with a sob story from one of the charities and how the money helps those in need. She asked me to pull up the charity website and literally walked me through entering my contribution. So, as a good little naive worker, I did as I was basically being forced to do, and contributed a minimum of $24 a year at $2 a month from my measly salary. I made our department reach 100% participation. Who cares, right? The next year, I purposely waited until the last second to make my contribution, to see if I got the same one-on-one chat with the admin lady. Sure enough, here she comes, with the same sob story that she has memorized. Once again, she baby-talked me through making my contribution while she watched. I soon became her target to get rid of. She was out for my job, so she separated me from people I got along well with, including my direct boss, and made me report directly to her. I knew I had to get out of there quickly, or I'd lose my job. I applied for positions and wound up transferring to another department within a few weeks. It ended up being an amazing move, and one of my favourite positions to date. In this new department, they organised and ran multiple company, city and county-wide events, one of the biggest being the charity campaign for the whole company. I brought up to my new coworkers how incredibly weird my previous admin lady was at that time of year. They said, well, of course she wanted 100% participation. Admins get a bonus when their departments are at 100% participation. You can bet your sweet rear ends I started telling everyone in my previous department about that little tidbit. The next year, that department had one of the lowest participation efforts. Being that I was in a better place in life and actually liked my new department and leadership, I began willingly contributing. The new admin would take that bonus and buy everyone lunch or some other form of thanks. I wonder if that admin lady ever found out the OP was the one behind her department participation suddenly tanking. Bet that bonus you cost her was a hell of a lot more than the $24 she cost you. Am I the a-hole for pretending I didn't know I was adopted to make a teacher embarrassed? Posted by a throwaway account. Okay, so I'm in high school and this was my English class. Our real teacher is on paternity leave and we have a long-term substitute. So yesterday, she was telling us she wants us to write personal memoirs about something very important in our lives. And she goes about listing various examples for different students. She told me I could write about being adopted and how I felt when my parents told me. Now, I must have made a face then because I'm not adopted. I have two dads, but they had me through surrogacy. So technically, there was a legal adoption for my non-bio dad, but one of my dads is my bio dad. And my bio mum is my other dad's sister who donated her egg and carried me. I think it'd be a stretch to call me adopted. Also, the sub has no basis to know any of this because all I've written in class is that I have two dads. Anyway, she's kind of old school and doesn't like it when we talk too loud, which to her is talking at a normal indoor level on group assignments, making any normal faces and whatever. She basically called me out on making a face and was like, OP, if you don't want to write about being adopted, you can choose another important topic to your life. Maybe how you help your dad at home. One of my dads has cerebral palsy and is mostly blind from optic neuropathy. I did write briefly about that in the intro assignment with our other teacher, so he must have left them with her to get to know the class. I was confused, so I said, I'm not adopted. She put her hand over her heart and goes, oh honey! So now my brain, which was lagging, caught up and I realised she was only thinking I'm adopted because I have 2 dads. So at this point, I'm like, I'll just play into it. So I look upset and I'm like, I didn't know I was adopted. She's kind of panicking a bit and telling everyone to just start writing something. A lot of my friends are laughing under their breath because they know I'm not adopted, so she's telling everyone to quiet down and it's not funny and to get to work. I'm like, what do you mean I'm adopted? She's trying to tell me to not worry about it and just ask my dad when I get home. And I'm like, how can I be adopted? So she just sent me to the school counsellor and I told her this story. She basically gave off the vibe that it was awful to mess with the sub that way. I could have just explained that I'm not adopted, because now I've made her worry unnecessarily and embarrassed her. I don't think parts of my life are up to her to decide what I want to share or not. And I feel like it's on her if she feels embarrassed for assumptions she made. Maybe that makes me the a-hole? Desert Song Lala says, not the a-hole, this teacher is completely inappropriate. Good on you for mirroring back her BS. The counsellor has a bad perspective. She and the teacher are not respecting you as a person, including your privacy. What about the teacher plainly talking about you and then conveying pity to your supposed ignorance? School staff should not state personal details or insinuations in class. This is a breach of privacy. You and your family should submit a complaint or meet with the principal, teacher, and counsellor. There's no stopping this person. Imagine her asking others, you can write about being homeless, your GMA's passed, twins' death in the ice last year. Imagine if these topics were stated out loud in the class for her to write about. Best to you. OP replied and said, yeah, that's basically what she's doing. Like, for example, she told my friend to write about what it was like immigrating from India, and told another kid to write about having a sibling who survived childhood cancer. The sibling also goes to our high school and there's a little plaque for her in the office. Stuff like that. Baby Cowgirl says, all of her examples of things to write about while being big events also have a high chance of being deeply traumatic. Immigration to a new country, new language, new culture, that can be extremely hard, especially for a kid. Watching your sibling go through cancer, not knowing if this is going to be their last birthday, Christmas, Easter, whatever, that's hard. Being adopted, if he had been, that can be very traumatic. Like, what the F? Scorp128 says, it is one thing to ask a student to write about an important event in their life. It is completely different to start spouting off specific things tailored to an individual student who may or may not have strong feelings on that topic. Even if that student has mentioned it before in other writings, teachers should not be weaponizing this kind of information. Maybe they just shared it in an assignment because they thought that their private information would stay between them and their teacher. Doesn't mean it should be trotted out in front of the entire class as an example. Teachers shouldn't be asking loaded questions that have the possibility of triggering traumatic events in kids' lives. And if they do, they better be damn well prepared for the fallout they cause by pushing the issue. I can't sell food? Fine, I'll sell plates then. Posted by Wikipedia. 14-year-old me was a menace to society. She had a fair share of respect for authority and rules, but if you tried to impose a ridiculous rule on her, she found the tiniest of loopholes, and she'd exploit it to kingdom come. Set the scene. I'm in middle school and it's almost Easter, so every class is putting up a kiosk for a bazaar. You're allowed to sell anything. Legal, obviously. Crafts, pastries, art, etc. My class wants to make some money to fund a trip. I've always liked cooking and making desserts, so I offered to make crepes for us to sell. I get up at an ungodly hour every morning and make them to make sure they're fresh. I wear gloves and a hairnet and make sure to sanitize everything to make sure it was safe. A classmate brings bananas because his dad owns a grocery store. Someone else brings honey their relatives sent them because they live in a rural area, etc. You get the point. Team effort. We're up and running in no time and making bank. At lunch break, we always have a huge queue of kids waiting to buy our crepes. Unfortunately, that means the other kiosks aren't getting as much business. We're on good terms with most of the kids from the other kiosks and they're chill about it. One kiosk has more traffic than the others because they're giving out homemade cookies with every purchase. So, after a few days, the girls from the cookie kiosk come over to us along with the headmaster. He says we can't sell food anymore because it's unfair to the other kiosks. I pointed out that the girls are also giving out cookies, to which he replies, "You can give out whatever you want for free, including food, but you cannot sell it. It's unfair competition." How is free less competitive? Again, if he'd shut it down because of a health concern, we'd have dropped it at the bat of an eye. Health is no joke. But claiming it was unfair that we had a good business idea just didn't sit right with me. Everyone else was free to do what we were doing. I kept thinking about what he said. You can see where this is going, right? We were serving the crepes on those generic white paper plates. So I buy a food safe marker, flip some plates over, and start doodling. And some of my classmates with a knack for art follow suit. We mostly did cartoon and anime characters. Then I hang up some plates around our kiosk and change our sign to cartoon character art, $2 a piece, plus a crepe of your choice with every purchase. And we are back in business. And just like clockwork, the next day, the cookie kiosk girls are back at our kiosk with the headmaster again. "I thought I made myself clear," he says. "You did, sir," I reply and point at the sign. After a long silence, a calm facepalm, and a long, "I don't get paid enough for this" sigh, he relents and I give him a crepe on the house. He also suggested I become a lawyer. Petty malicious compliance. Delicious! Literally. Don't hurt the sweetest girl because I'm not that sweet. Posted by Realistic You. About 25 years ago, I was working in a restaurant. The manager and one of the part-time girls were dating. He was a bit of a jerk, but she was the sweetest girl I've ever met. She was the type of girl that, if this was a cartoon, animals would flock to her. They came from another state because he got a promotion and left everything behind. One day, he came into work, and tells her he's dumping her because he met someone else and she has to be out of the house that night. It was his house and he paid all the bills. She was obviously devastated. I took her home and called the other workers and we packed her up. After a while, I told everyone I was going to get us lunch. No one knew, but on the way out of work, I had grabbed a pair of thick rubber gloves, the kind that go up to your elbows. On the way to get food, I stopped at a joke shop and picked up some itching powder. Whilst the others were packing, I went into the bedroom and rubbed itching powder into every pair of underpants in his drawer. If you rub it in hard enough, it can't be seen, so he just wore them. She stayed with me for a week before she could go home to her family. During this time, he was constantly scratching, trying to be discreet. I told him that maybe he caught something from his new girlfriend. He said no, it couldn't have been because she'd stopped sleeping with him once he'd started itching and still won't. Itching powder isn't easy to get rid of, even if you wash your clothes, so he was scratching for weeks. He deserved it. I ruined my coworker's first chance at a vacation in 3 years. Posted by One Art Please. My coworker and I share a space. She's been there 3 years. Myself, 5 months. She's not my boss, but constantly looks over my shoulder, telling me how to change my work. She's rude to the people we work with overseas online. She does it all on speakerphone and ignores me when I ask her to use a headset while she yells at them. She talks about her stomach problems and her issues pooping. When I ask her not to, she tells me to get over it. If another coworker comes to speak to me, she answers for and over me. She also swears at her computer and verbally responds to every email she doesn't like. She also constantly talks under her breath while reading her work. I've asked her many times to please stop, but she got pissed, saying she doesn't jump to my tune and complains about having to walk on eggshells around me as if she isn't accustomed to modifying her behaviour for anyone. The company is tiny, the owner is insanely and pitifully cheap, so I'm the first person in years that's able to cover her work. She's desperate for a vacation and recently booked a long trip to Hong Kong for 2.5 weeks. She doesn't know yet, but I was recently offered a way better full-time job through someone I've worked freelance for in the past. My freelancer is understanding if I wanted to push out my start date, as my coworker's holiday is in 2 weeks. But I think I'll give my notice early. Our boss is a huge a-hole and my coworker hates his guts. It should be an interesting fallout because if she goes on holiday, then there's no one who can do her job. She'll have a total meltdown. Now, while what OP did was petty, the OP in our next video takes petty revenge to a whole new level by sleeping with his ex-girlfriend's affair child 23 years later. Click here to hear the whole story, and thanks for watching.